This week, I want to do something special for our review, and I want to do something that I've honestly dreamed of doing since before I started my YouTube channel. For those that don't know, I used to just post random reviews on Atari.io, and I planned on using them to launch my own Atari review website. I wanted to have a plethora of content right at launch, so I reached out to somebody known as FrankoDragon, or Clark Otto Jr. Franko gave me a written review that you can actually still read on Atari7800forever.com, but I'll also use some quotes in the video where appropriate. So FrankoDragon is not only a homebrew developer for the Atari 7800, but he is the biggest, completely independent developer on that console. He is not affiliated with Atari Age. He has no connection to Video 61 or Good Deal Games, and heck, he doesn't even have a website to grab his carts from. So, how do you get his games? You contact him on Atari Age or any other forum he's active on, and ask for a list of his games he has for sale, and then message him and PayPal him money. A week later, you have a cartridge for your Atari. But FrankoDragon doesn't do just any games. This man does some of the craziest stuff I've ever seen. And just fair warning, most of it seems to have something to do with fecal matter. His games are not typical of what most people would expect. And when I asked Franko about that in the text interview, here was his response as to why he covers such crazy topics. I've had someone from Atari Age give me ideas for crazy games, such as a fat guy wanting burritos, so you have to throw him a burrito while working in a warehouse, avoiding all kinds of obstacles. Other games can be attributed to memes, such as Fat Axl, aka Axl Rose, when he complained to Google about deleting all the images of him being fat. End quote. So basically, if he likes an idea, he just does it. So let's celebrate FrankoDragon and his games, and present them to the world. This is a collection of 5 FrankoDragon releases that you can play on your Atari 7800 Pro system. First off, we have Roof Pooper, and this was the game that introduced me to Franko. There is something about a game where you move left or right on a roof, and drop poop onto bystanders below that just felt so, I don't know, crazy. It was intriguing, it was a funny idea, and one that made sense to become a video game, at least to me. Seriously, there is a lot you could do with the premise of pooping on people from roofs. And if I'm honest, he did a great job with this one. The title screen isn't that great, however, but it's just there to let you know the game booted properly. Oh, and it does work on the 2600 Plus, surprisingly enough. So after the title screen, you're presented with a series of buildings and a man standing on top of one in the center. You can move that man left or right, and people wander on the streets below. So, what do? You hold down the button to let a solid loaf of righteous justice rain down on unsuspecting bystanders below. That's what you do. And it's fun, even if the controls take a second to adjust to. One would think you just press the button and that would release a round. But no, you have to hold the button down until it hits a person or the bottom of the screen. If you let go of the button, the turd magically disappears. Strange, but it works well enough for Roof Pooper. But back to the start of the game, you'll see 3 people wandering the street below, and your goal is to hit them with your brown logs. If you successfully connect, then you'll hear a beep, which is supposed to be screams, and the people below disappear, giving you an increase to your total score. If you hit the cop, then you get 1 star, and he disappears as well. If you hit 3 cops and obtain 3 stars, it's game over, and you spend the rest of your life pooping in jail. So the game is simple and silly, but it works well and the backgrounds change colors and layouts. More and more people crowd the streets below, and the cops start to wander around a bit faster. But the game isn't truly difficult, really. If you really take your time, you can play it forever. But I prefer to make it challenging and move quickly, trying to spray and pray to progress as fast as I can. There really isn't any sound outside of the screams, which is fine, and the graphics are okay. But man, some of these characters are ugly. But a lot of Roof Pooper is just silly and funny, and it's a good game to throw on when you're having a bad day and need a silly reason to smile. I asked FrankoDragon about Roof Pooper specifically in that interview I did, and here was his explanation of the game. Roof Pooper was a simpler version of another game titled Muddy Heights, without all the physics of turds falling from a roof. It's kind of a revenge game. If somebody had a bad day, he could play Roof Pooper and poop on all the clueless pedestrians, but not the cops. There had to be some skill in the game, otherwise it would get boring very quick. End quote. So for these small reviews, we aren't doing the typical pros and cons thing, but I am giving each game a score. Despite all of Roof Pooper's flaws, it's just too silly and fun to hate on. That's why I'm giving it 3 Proline controllers out of 5. That's right, the Atari Network gave a game about scat and somebody pooping on people a good score. Crazy, right? But we have 4 more games to cover, so let's move on to the next one with toilet humor, which is Shatneroids. Shatneroids starts with a much nicer title screen. I really like the font he used in the name, and the William Shatner character is, well, it's interesting. The game itself sort of plays like a reverse roof pooper. You are on the bottom of the screen this time, and you shoot at the tons of stuff falling at you from the sky and moving side to side as well. You have 99 seconds on a timer, but if you reach predetermined scores, then you continually reset it and continue. Apparently all the falling stuff should be recognizable from different memes and stuff like that, but this game was done in the mid-2010s, so keep that in mind. The only one I recognized was the toilet from the game's label and the Nyan Cat thing. Oh, and we have to talk about the label. So, it has a Photoshop picture of William Shatner, of Star Trek fame, struggling to go number 2 on a toilet. I'm starting to notice a pattern here. But it does make for an intriguing game, as whenever somebody comes over, they want to know about the William Shatner pooping game. But back to what's inside the cart, you really can't get damaged by the enemies in this game. They're just there to be shot, as they can't kill you or slow you down at all. The sound is once again minimal, almost non-existent, and the gameplay uses the same control method as Roof Pooper. You hold down the button to keep your shots flying through the sky, and they can hit multiple enemies by holding it longer. But the graphics, even though being on par with Roof Pooper, just aren't as interesting as that game. There's just too much stuff flying around, and it's too hard to keep up with what they're supposed to be, or even care about them if I'm honest. I personally find Shatneroids too easy and boring. I had to try to lose the game because you can easily conquer it by just moving around a bit and shooting. Actually, you don't even have to move around. Once you know the spots that most enemies come from, you can just sit in one place and shoot. Also, it appears that some of the enemies can't be killed for some reason, and I think that's due to a programming error. That definitely detracts from the whole package, if you ask me. But with all that, I think we covered all there really is to Shatneroids. So I'm going to give that game 2 Proline controllers out of 5. It's just not that much fun and gets too repetitive way too quickly. There needed to be an element of danger for it to be fun, and some deeper gameplay would help too. But if you want a 7800 game with the label of William Shatner using the toilet, well, this is the game for you. Oh, and it's 2600 plus compatible too, for those who are curious. But let's move on from Shatneroids and the whole scat theme, and check out something different. Let's take a look at Crazy Tank, a game released from FrankoDragon back in 2018. And this is everything that Shatneroids should have been. Seriously, it feels like he learned a lot in between the 2 games, and corrected everything that was flawed about the previous title. In Crazy Tank, you play a tank that is stuck to the bottom of the screen, as you normally are in these games. The same hold the button down control scheme is used here, and I don't know if it's just his trademark or what. It works, but some variety in controls would be nice. But the sprite work is a step up from Shatneroids. There is a lot on the screen, well, eventually, and it's easy to tell what these things are supposed to be, or at least you'll get the general idea. So you play as the tank, and you basically want to destroy everything in your path as you progress. In the beginning, there are only a few enemies, and really only one that fights back. But as your score increases, you'll come across houses, and you'll need to drive into them to progress to the next level. Each new level introduces a new color and background, and these are once again a step up from, say, Roof Pooper. The color choices are much easier on the eyes, and things get way more interesting. The background changes from clear sky, to huts in the distance, to mountains, and so forth. And more of the enemies will start to fire back at you. And they'll also start to respond to your movements, so when you're ducking and weaving between them, you'll have to understand how they will respond. The cat, for instance, will stop dropping down towards you, and begin to move completely left or right depending on what you're doing. And when you're avoiding another enemy, it could cause the cat to hit you anyway. Very smart enemy design if you ask me. And Crazy Tank also adds that element of danger that Shatneroids was missing. You have a health bar and you lose it pretty liberally. Luckily, you can pick up fuel tanks that restore large chunks of health, but they do seem to be rare. I had fun with Crazy Tank, but like most things, it wasn't perfect. The collision detection is questionable to say the least. You'll hit enemies that it looks like you clearly missed, and this is because their hitboxes seem to be a square around the sprite. But that's fine. I like the generosity in the hitboxes. These hitboxes also apply to you, and you'll take damage when you otherwise shouldn't have. It can be annoying when your health is low and you lose due to poor collision detection. The audio is also pretty bad. You mostly hear the treads of your tank, but there are other stuff that isn't much better. Still, Crazy Tank is probably his best game that we've looked at yet, but it also might be the least interesting for outsiders. It lacks the shock factor of some of the other stuff that he does, but I applaud his range. Having the ability to do silly stuff, as well as more traditionally themed games, is a good skill to have. That's why we're going to give Crazy Tank on the Atari 7800 3 Pro-Line controllers out of 5. It's a good game. Oh, and I almost forgot. It's 2600 plus compatible. Okay guys, next we have Chicago Basement. And the premise of this game is you heard about a legend of a basement in Chicago chocked full of retro gaming goodness. So you head there and steal the stuff, I guess? The title screen is nothing special, but man, that music is some of the worst I've ever heard. Sorry Clark, but it's just not that good. So you start the game and you're in an empty room with a door. Where's all the retro gaming goodness? In the door? You go in and find yourself in a different colored room. And truth is, there's 4 rooms in total. You can go between them at will. The stuff starts to slide in from the sides of the screen. You'll see spiders, snakes I think, rodents, and so forth that you have to dodge. And is that the Incredible Hulk? Strange. Anyway, you will also see what looks like various arcade machines, consoles, and cartridges that you have to grab. Overall, the game just isn't very fun. You literally avoid some things, run into others, and change the screen sometimes. And some of the rooms introduce a lot of slowdown to the game, and I'm not really sure why. Even on the 2600 Plus, which this game is compatible with by the way, the graphics are just boring, and there is nowhere near enough variety in obstacles and items. I occasionally saw something different from time to time, but it was mostly the same white console and arcade machine. The game isn't fun, and the premise is boring too. With games like Roof Pooper and Shatneroids, at least the idea was so crazy that you couldn't help but to be intrigued. And with Crazy Tank, the gameplay was solid and enjoyable. But Chicago Basement lacks all these elements. It's by far the worst game we've played in this video, and there really isn't much more to say. I'm sorry, Franco, but this one is going to get 2 Pro-Line controllers out of 5. I definitely want to play this over, say, Lava Lamps and 8-tracks, but only slightly. But let's try to finish the video strong with our last game we're going to take a look at, and it's the one I think Franco is really proud of. In my interview with him from a few years back, I asked him what game he was most proud of and why, and this was his response: Draker Quest 2. I never thought any of my games would win 3rd place from an independent homebrew YouTube channel for Best Atari 7800 Game of the Year. It also used a password system that took some time to make, but it worked pretty well. End quote. So being the game that he is most proud of, I think it's a good game to finish the video on. So Draker's Quest 2 is a Zelda-style adventure game where you take control of this little baby Dragon Ball thing called a Draker. And if I'm honest, it's kinda cute. Well, for a 7800 sprite. So you just start off dropped into this world and enemies are flying across the screen from the sides and at odd angles. You have a little square thing that you carry around, and this is your main attack. And you guessed it, you use it by holding down the button to have it move across the screen longer. But it is kinda cool, as you can rapid fire it in a short range in front of you in order to get a lot of hits in. Or you can send it across the screen and even guide it a little by moving the joystick. But beware, you're still moving your little Draker while guiding this projectile. So, as I wander across the world, I find little towers that I don't think do anything, but they're cool and seem like they should be something more important than what they are. You also find little stairs that lead to caves, and some of them seem to be shortcuts for moving around the world. You can also find 2 caves that are populated with your species, and they attempt to give you help. They tell you about 4 crystals you need to move on to the next world, and they tell you could even get a password if you acquire all 4. So off I go to find the dungeons and get the crystals. And the dungeons are these Roman numeral looking things on the overworld. They kinda remind me of the palaces from Zelda 2. So you enter them and occasionally have to find a key or fight a boss to get the crystals. Well, I assume they're the crystals. I found 1 in each dungeon, but they look more like leaves to me. So I wander all around the world and find 4 dungeons and 4 crystals, take them back to my fellow Drakers, and they won't acknowledge what I've done. I tried everything and eventually tried every button and switch on the console and wound up resetting my game. So with that, I was done with Draker Quest 2. I played it on the 2600 Plus, by the way, and I have to say I'm quite impressed that all of FrankoDragon's games were compatible with the 2600 Plus. But Draker Quest 2 has some serious issues. I understand why Franco is so proud of this game, I really do. It looks and feels massive, and the sprites are probably his best yet. I think he has a cool idea for a big Zelda-style game and world, and I'd love to see all of it, but the game is just lacking direction, and isn't inviting to the player. The overworld, dungeons, and caves all have room after room that look exactly the same, and it causes you to get lost fast. I don't know how many times I ran in circles looking for something to do. It just wasn't fun. But beyond that, the combat is flawed too, and it's down to the enemy behavior. They are cool enemies, but they float down onto the screen from the edges, and continue to do so even as you transition screens. This makes for cheap hits, and it doesn't really look good if I'm honest. The enemies need to be placed on the screens and move about like in Zelda games, Or like in Dark Chambers on the 7800. The enemies feel cheap and aren't fun to fight, so you just end up avoiding them and sort of wander about the world. And it's not clear what anything is or what you're supposed to do with them. I don't know how many times I came across stuff, like rings, the weird crystal leaf things, fruits, and more, and I had no clue how to use them or even what they did. Your Draker friends mention ways to increase your life and get passwords, but none of it seems to happen and wasn't easy to figure out how to do any of it. Ultimately, Draker Quest 2 is a game that I just wanted to like. It has so much charm, and I know Franko loves these characters in this world that he made. And they are good characters in design, but the game is poor in execution and borders being unplayable. He stated he was most proud of this game, and I almost left it off the video, because I don't want the guy to break up about it. But I decided to keep it here, because I want to see a Draker Quest 3 that fixes all the issues and is an incredible Zelda-style adventure on the 7800. I want this series and FrankoDragon to succeed, but I can't recommend this one, and that's why we're going to give Draker's Quest 2 for the Atari 7800 2 Pro-Line controllers out of 5. Its charm just can't save it, as it's too flawed to enjoy or to be able to play effectively. So, there you have it, guys. 5 games from the 7800's most prolific independent developer. I enjoyed Roof Pooper for being a fantastically wild idea that was well executed, and I think people will just want to have it for the idea alone. But Crazy Tank is the best game of the bunch. It was legitimately fun, and despite its flaws, I wanted to continue playing it even after I got the footage I needed for this video. Unfortunately, Shatneroids wasn't great, but the label might make it an interesting shelf piece to get friends interested in your crazy Atari collection. Draker's Quest 2 is overflowing with charm and big ideas, and it's a game that I really wanted to like, but I just can't recommend it as is. I hope to see a third installment that improves on this one and brings the Drakers home in a great adventure on the Pro system. But avoid Chicago Basement. It's just not that great in my opinion. But if you are interested in any of these games, or any other ones that FrankoDragon, aka Clark Otto, has developed, then please reach out to him on the Atari Age forums. His username is FrankoDragon, and he sells his stuff at reasonable prices with paper manuals included. And that's it for our look at his library of games. Now I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Which of these 5 games interest you the most? Have you played any of them, or any of Franko's other stuff? If so, did you like any of them? And what about the scores I gave his games? Do you agree, or should I have taken a different angle in the reviews? Let me know about all this and more down below. And please leave a like and subscribe for more reviews and videos like this one. We put out 2 videos a week. And thank you to the following classy Atarians who support me on Patreon. It's $5 a month, and they get access to behind-the-scenes stuff, early access to certain videos and interviews, audio-only things, and much more. Thanks, guys, for supporting the Atari Network. You all rock. And be sure to check out the Atari Network live shows, including Man vs. 7800 every other Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific. It's a show where I try to best the 7800 and some of its best games. The next one can be seen on the date being shown on the screen right now. And check out the Atari Network podcast with myself and co-host Vinny Vineyard. We discuss all things Atari with the fans, and it's a really fun time. So check it out every other Friday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 Pacific. The next one is on the screen right now as well. Okay, guys, I'm the 7800 Pro Gamer, a man who apparently loves games that revolve around poop and pooping on other people here at the Atari Network. And I'd like to thank you all for watching our look at FrankoDragon's games. And remember, stay classy, Atarians.